Dear Jean-Christophe Deslarzes, dear representative of our people innovation ecosystem, the global HR Valley, dear colleagues and students, esteemed guests. Good evening and welcome to this inaugural lecture on leadership in the future of work. And now I cite, as we navigate through the challenges and opportunities presented by the rapidly changing landscape of work, it is essential that we have strong and visionary leaders who can guide us towards success. The future of work presents a multitude of exciting possibilities, including technological advancements, new forms of collaboration, and innovative ways of working. At the same time, it also poses significant challenges such as changing workforce demographics, the need for upskilling and reskilling, and the demand for sustainable and socially responsible business practices. End quote. My problem at the moment is I do not know how to cite this properly. It's not bad, the text, I must admit. I can say so because I did not write it. Because for this initial statement, I hired a ghostwriter that is currently very popular. I asked, as you know, ChatGPT to give me some input for a short welcome address that fits the topic of tonight's event. As stated by the chatbot, technological advancements such as artificial intelligence offer exciting possibilities for the future of work. However, robots aren't taking over the world yet. They do not have the cognitive skills and the critical ability needed to manage very complex tasks. Again, maybe not yet. Also, when it comes to perception, emotional intelligence and creativity, AI currently still falls very short. Or, as the founder of OpenAI, Sam Altman, self-critically admitted in a tweet, ChatGPT is incredibly limited but good enough at some things to create a misleading impression of greatness. So I hope you all enjoyed this moment of greatness. So it remains to be seen what impact this invention will have on our world of work. But it's one of the many examples that make it clear that change is happening right before our eyes. At the University of Zurich, we do not simply want to await the future of work. We wish to shape it. We wish to shape it by research that we do to produce innovation. We wish to shape it by the people we educate to be the change leaders of tomorrow, and by events such as the one tonight that make us all not just speculate what the future may hold, but also think about what we want the future to be. If we are to shape the future, we need leadership. And we need leaders equipped with the skills, the purpose, and the vision that are essential to shaping the future for the better. To this end, we launch our new lecture series on leadership in the future of work. This particular flagship lecture series is organized by our University of Zurich Center for Leadership in the Future of Work in collaboration with the Europa Institute. It is part of our efforts to build a people innovation ecosystem, which we name the Global HR Valley, with the purpose to shape a more human-centric future of work, one in which people can feel, do, and be their best at work. I will now hand over to the director of the Center for Leadership in the Future of Work, Jochem Menges, who will briefly introduce the center. I wish you all an inspiring evening, and thank you very much for your attention.
So, good evening also from my side, and a very warm welcome. Dear Jean-Christophe Deslarzes, welcome to the University of Zurich. And dear Michael Scatman, many thanks for your kind words and for the enthusiastic support you provide for our efforts to shape the future of work for the better. Now, I want to take a moment just briefly to introduce you to the Center for Leadership in the Future of Work at the University of Zurich, and also to say thank you to all those who've made this lecture tonight possible. We founded the Center for Leadership in the Future of Work for 4 reasons. The first one is that conversations about the future of work often concern technological innovation, addressing how technology will fundamentally change the way we work. And yes, of course it will. But it's also important that we need to innovate in the people space, and that we need to think about how we would better collaborate, how we could be more creative, more productive, how we could feel better and do better at work. The second reason was that the world seems to move from one crisis to the next, and leaders rush to address each crisis as a unique challenge. And what is often forgotten or overlooked is that actually all crises have one common denominator, and that is that they evoke strong emotions, and that the task of leaders is always to steer these emotions in ways that help us resolve the crisis. For that, leaders need social and emotional skills, skills that we need to develop alongside technical and digital skills. Third, leaders often rely on their experience rather than on scientifically established evidence in making people decisions. And finally, many businesses and organizations seek to address people challenges in isolation, even if they often struggle with the very same topics, such as how to find and keep great talent, how to organize remote work. More collaboration across various stakeholders in business and society would help find better solutions for these challenges. So for these 4 reasons, we found the Center for Leadership in the Future of Work with the generous support of the Adecco Group and the strategic guidance from the Boston Consulting Group. The vision we pursue is to establish the world's first people innovation ecosystem, bringing various stakeholders across society together, like tonight, around a common purpose, to shape the future of work for the better. Tech has Silicon Valley as the most famous of the many valleys that exist, ecosystems that innovate new technologies. But the future of work also needs an HR valley, an innovation ecosystem dedicated to people. We launched this idea at the World Economic Forum in January 2020, and since then, we have been pursuing 3 core activities to push people innovation forward. The first is our activity area Discover. We drive the global research agenda to focus more on people in the future of work, both through our own original research, but also through encouraging others around the world to do more research on the human side in the future of work. For example, through our Global Future of Work Research Prize. Second, in our activity area Inspire, we offer innovative learning journeys and share key insights to equip current and future leaders with the social and emotional skills that they need to meet the challenges that lie ahead. And finally, in our last activity area, Shape, we incubate solutions for a people-friendly future of work together with businesses, startups, government, and other stakeholders across society. And as part of these very efforts, tonight we gather as a group of, I hope, enthusiasts that are invested in shaping the future for the better. Among us is our very distinguished speaker, Jean-Christophe Deslarzes, Chair of the Board of Directors of the Adecco Group. Thank you and everyone at the Adecco Group for your commitment to making the future work for everyone. I also want to thank the Europa Institute at the University of Zurich for their support in providing and delivering tonight's lecture. Thank you very much, Andreas Kellerhals, Director of the Europa Institute, and Doris Lindenmayer for your support. It has been a real pleasure to collaborate with you. And I want to thank our fantastic team at the Center for Leadership in the Future of Work for all the amazing work that they have done to organize tonight's lecture. You can recognize these members of our center by the lanyard that they wear and the name tag that they have around their neck, and perhaps they can just stand up for one moment And finally, I want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules tonight to reflect on how to lead in the future of work. It is through your interest and initiative that together we have the opportunity to shape the future of work for the better. So thank you very much for being here with us tonight. I will now hand over to my dear colleague, Dr. Jennifer Spa, who's the mastermind behind tonight's lecture, and who will share tonight's program briefly, and then also have the honor of introducing Jean-Christophe Deslarzes. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Jochen, for the handover, and a very warm welcome to everyone also from my side, and especially to our distinguished guest tonight, Jean-Christophe Deslarzes. Let's have a quick look at the program. So in the next half hour, after those welcome words we have heard now, our distinguished speaker for tonight, Jean-Christophe Deslarzes, will share his insights on what leadership to take up the future of work. And afterwards, Jochen Menges will open up the floor for your questions and for a lively discussion we're going to have. And in the end, Michael Scapman will kindly close this lecture with a few words. So that's the plan, and afterwards we invite all of you for an inspiring apéro down in the Lichthof, where you can mingle with other forward-thinking people. So this will be the end of the evening, but now let me finally introduce our speaker, Jean-Christophe Deslarzes. He studied law at the University of Fribourg and has dedicated most of his career to people. So from 1994 to 2010, he held various human resource and general management roles at Rio Tinto and its predecessor companies Alcan and Alu Swiss, including positions as president and CEO of downstream aluminium businesses at Rio Tinto, as well as chief human resource officer and member of the respective executive committee of Alcan, both companies based in Montreal. From 2010 to 2013, he was a chief human resources officer and member of the respective group executive committees of Carrefour, based in Paris, and from 2013 to 2019 of ABB, based here in Zurich. Since 2020, now Jean-Christophe Deslarzes has been the chair of the board of the Adecco Group. And the Adecco Group is partner for HR solutions to help businesses optimize their talent and transfer their workforces, building employability of people and thus contributing to the future of work. So he also serves as the chair of the board of directors at Constellium, and Constellium is a global leader in the development, manufacturing, and recycling of aluminium products and solutions. What you can guess from this impressive career is that Jean-Christophe Deslarzes has seen many leaders, and he has seen how leadership has been changing and how who gets to lead also is changing. Tonight, we are very eager to learn how he envisions the leadership of the future. So please join me in welcoming Jean-Christophe Deslarzes to the University of Zurich. Jean-Christophe, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, for these very warm introductory words, and hello to everyone. We are in the midst of an unprecedented, I would say, unprecedented time, we could almost say. And why? Because it is a sort of a paradox that we have in the labor market. And why is that? Because on the one hand, we have geopolitical volatility and economic uncertainty, and we could say a slowdown. Some would call it a looming recession. And on the other hand, we have job full. So it's sort of a job full recession, one could say. And in this context, the question obviously is how leaders should navigate. So let me start with a few words on not big statistics, but a few words on data, then analyzing why we live a little bit in this paradox, and then we shift gears and are going to talk truly about leadership, and I will just offer 3 leadership paradigms that should, I hope, help us all to navigate in these times of the future of work. Is that okay as a program? So I'm going to start with a little bit of data. So yes, it's a little bit sort of a poly-crisis. As I said before, the geopolitical volatility combined with the economic uncertainty, we could even say, as if this was not sufficient, that we seem to have difficulties to tackle really the climate change issues. And on the other hand, we have quite a resilient job market. So the geopolitical uncertainty and economic uncertainty is confirmed by data, right? The World Bank says that in 2023, the growth should be around 1.7%, and just 6 months ago, they told us that it would be 3%. We also know that, on the other hand, we have quite little unemployment, 2.3%, which is planned in Switzerland, 3.5% in the US, just to give 2 reference points. And interestingly, 70% of the people, 70% of the colleagues in the companies feel safe, secure. They think their job is secure. And if you ask, well, if you were dismissed, how long would it go approximately until you find a job? 60% say 6 months. 6 months. So we have a bizarre situation, a little bit of a paradox, and the question is why. So let me try to give you 3 reasons why I think we have a little bit of a paradox in the labor market. First of all, demographics. We had in the US 1.3 million baby boomers leaving the job market between 2020 and today. And if you think about the few coming years, 2/3 of the people in our companies will be millennials. These are commonly defined as the people who are born 1985 and later. So 2/3 of the employees will be millennials. So clearly, demographics is one of the causes of this paradox. The second one that we certainly could think about is skill shortage. Immediately comes to mind the digital revolution, the green transition, and the skills needed in this respect. Indeed, during the COVID crisis, 60% of the people told us in surveys, well, my skills increased, my digital skills increased. And 70% said, not enough, I want more because I know that with these digital skills, I'm going to be stronger on the labor market. And in parallel to that, we have in Switzerland, just to take the country we're sitting in today, a big difference between this year's gap between supply and demand and last year's gap in supply and demand. In fact, the gap has increased by 68%. And if you look at the OECD stat, they say that the functions, the jobs that are most requested these days are in health, in science and digital, and these are also precisely the jobs that people are scarce about. The second root cause, hence, is really skill shortage. The third one is probably the psychological impact of the COVID crisis. 1/4, 25% of the people who are surveyed, across many surveys that one can read, state that their mental health has diminished during that period of time. 25% in the last 2 years say that the mental illness, the mental health has diminished if they consider how their well-being has developed. And as if this was not sufficient, we lost more women in the job market in 2021 as in the 10 last years. So more women in 2021 in the job markets than the last 10 years. And cherry on the cake, if you will, in terms of the psychological impact of the COVID crisis is this big resignation. I prefer to call it big re-evaluation. Imagine 1/3 of the employees think today in the companies globally that they might want to change their jobs this year. 1/3. And 2/3 of the 1/3 think that this should be to become an entrepreneur or to make a break. They re-evaluate themselves. So this is sort of the situation we're in and the possible causes of the paradox we're in. So the question is, we as leaders or upcoming leaders, how should we navigate in the future of work? I'm going to offer 3 paradigms. The first one is learning to learn. What comes to mind immediately is, as I said before, or I hinted to it before, the digital revolution and the green transition. Talking about the digital revolution, Dell already, I think in 2018, said in 2030, 85% of the jobs will be different than today. In 2018, prospects for 2030. So it's not so that people will lose their jobs, but that they will have to reinvent themselves. You know, we heard about ChatGPT just before, right? And if you ask her or him what he or she thinks in this respect, the answer will be, it's not AI taking you out of the job. It's the people who use AI. Now, let's think a little bit about this digital revolution and the skills we need to learn rapidly versus the 3 preceding ones. Because I remember in the 70s, when in the automotive industry, welding robots, came in the factory floors. Unions were in the streets, people were in the streets saying we're going to lose our jobs, etc. And never have we had as many jobs in the automotive industry since then. So we are adaptable and flexible, and we learn to learn. However, the difference with the digital revolution versus the 3 preceding industrial revolutions is the speed. And we need to make sure that we can capture the speed and go with the speed, learning digital skills. This is what happens in the companies. But let's make no mistake. Clearly, purpose and values will continue to be center stage. Because the leaders who think that maybe we should be enhanced. Do you want to be enhanced? Yeah, in learning, but probably not with a chip in your brain, right? So let's make sure that we keep the purpose and the values right in our companies, and that technology serves the human beings and not the contrary. But this is a little bit taken strategically, or maybe a little bit too far. Let's just think about the 2 last years and what we've learned from this crisis. And I will just quote a professional relationship whom I've encountered telling me, JC, if I had been told, let's put some virtual work into our day-to-day work, we would have created a project team, we would have established a risk committee, and probably after 1 year work, we would have concluded, yeah, it's okay to work virtually on Friday afternoon. Now, in the 2 coming years, needless to say, things have changed tremendously in this respect. Secondly, we need to learn from the green transition. And I'm just going to give you one example. In France, they think that 100,000 jobs are going to be created, 100,000 jobs in the hydrogen technologies. Now, this is not creating 100,000 engineers in hydrogen, but making sure that people, and not only engineers, blue-collar employees, factory employees, know about the hydrogen technology so that they can get used to what the future will bring in this respect. The Adecco Group has created a learning platform in this respect and will make sure that 26 job categories will continue to learn in hydrogen technologies. And at the end of the day, 1.6 million of people will be impacted in learning with respect to hydrogen technology. So digital learning and green transition learning. Now, what does this mean for us leaders? It means that we need to make sure not only to learn ourselves, but to create learning organizations. Now, I'm quite amazed, you know, if you look at the cost that is being spent, the investments, I would want to say, that are being put in training in the companies, you have 64% that goes to management and 36% to blue-collar employees. Now, you know who built the chairs you're sitting on here, right? It's the blue-collar employees. So we need to shift that paradigm and make sure that we invest much more into the development, into the training, into the learning of the blue-collar employees. I also want to mention that the learn to learn means employability. So if the leaders do the right thing in terms of learning, they will enhance societal value. It's not about just the company in and of itself, but it's making sure that we detect the skills, and it's not only digital and ecological skills, but it's also other skills, obviously, manufacturing skills that need to continue to be developed, and these create employability. And in order to really make sure that employability is big, we need to not only work within our companies, but together with learning institutions like the University of Zurich here today, and with governments. And why is this the case? Because the learning institutions will grasp from the companies what truly needs to be learned in order to take up the future of work. And the governments need to certify qualifications of new jobs, if possible, internationally. Now, I love the last seed that I would like to plant, which is, what if learning, training, was an investment and not a cost? What if US GAAP, IFRS accounting standards were to recognize that training, that the cost, so-called, of learning is actually an investment we get a return from? Well, then leaders, as soon as a restructuring hits or a cost reduction exercise hits, will not focus on reducing training. They will realize that, in fact, it's much better to reskill and upskill than to dismiss and re-employ. We've seen, in fact, in quite a number of studies, that the cost difference between dismissing and rehiring and reskilling and deploying is a multiple. So in fact, it's much cheaper to train and to redeploy than to dismiss and rehire. First leadership paradigm, learning to learn. The second leadership paradigm I want to go through with you is we need empathic leaders. So we talk quite a bit about the what, right? What skills? Digital, green. Let's shift gears now and talk a little bit about the how. And when it gets to the how, I want to split my comments into a structural element and a behavioral one. The structural is based, again, on some facts. If you ask people in companies what, how should I say, makes them tick, amongst 10 elements, you ask them to rank them. Well, salary is only the first one in not engaged workforces. In engaged workforces, it ranks number 6. And the first 4 ones are, I want to make sure that you invest in my career, that you invest in my skills, in flexibility, and in well-being. And hence, what in the companies needs to happen if you are a leader who thinks that you want to do good, meaning perform at the end of the day, is making sure that the right leadership, the right people, commonly called HR processes are being set up in training, in coaching, people development, people assessments, and this with the aim of giving and caring and not in requesting, which is a little bit different. Structural aspects of empathy. Now, this is fine, right? If you have, how should I say, processes in a company that sort of are geared towards increasing empathy, fine. But if yourself as a leader, you're not empathetic, it won't work. So what do we need as leaders in order to become a little bit more empathetic? I will just first tell you that clearly the Generation Z in particular started with the millennials, but the Generation Z even more, they want empathetic leaders. Why? Because purpose and values are so important to them. If we look at a little bit of stats, 74% of people, usually 3/4 of the people, say, I want a leader who has empathy, who is focused on well-being, who is focused on myself, who is human-centric. And the leaders themselves, 54% of them, again, according to stats, roughly half say, but help me, I'm not equipped. Well, surprise, surprise, right? Because since 100 years, starting with the Taylorism, we've been told, well, empathy, emotional leadership, no, it's not productive. Now, research shows, in fact, and the University of Zurich has done research in this respect, that indeed empathy increases productivity. So leaders who are empathetic increase creativity and innovation within the teams, which in turn increases productivity. And I find quite interesting what the research shows also is that employees who has empathy usually earn more money. It's interesting, eh? In other words, you show empathy, you're a stronger leader, you show empathy, you're a better employee. Now the good news is that you can learn this. So I was quite stunned, right? Because usually you think, well, cognitive skills are the ones that you can learn, the ones that can be taught. Well, socio-emotional skills can be taught too and can be learned. And this is, I think, very good news for all of us. Now, some are still not convinced, I see here, so I'm just going to ask you, for those who are not convinced, to close your eyes. No, don't close your eyes. But just think about the best leader you ever had, the best immediate boss, right, you ever had. Not your husband, not your wife, okay? At work, joke aside, your best boss. You got her? You got him in mind? Okay. Wasn't it the person who demonstrated trust, who asked questions how you are, who when you came after the weekend asked you what you've done with your children? More importantly, who cares about your career, who wants to enhance your skills, who trusts you, right? Empathy. Second paradigm, leaders need to be empathetic. The third one is they need to be adaptable and flexible. Now, you know, in the geopolitical volatility, economic uncertainty that we've discussed before, obviously, leaders need to have situational leadership, need to decide in a situational manner, and this with great flexibility and adaptability. But let's not even go there. Let's be just very pragmatic and think about the 2 last years. Whereas suddenly, in February 2020, from one day to the other, at the Adecco Group, and I'm sure in your various companies and organizations, from one day to the other, I can tell you the story from the Adecco Group, 95% of employees went home because the COVID crisis wall was hit and the governments made these decisions. And the volume dropped, so our volume dropped by 30%. Yet we wanted to serve our clients and candidates in an appropriate manner. So what happened is people took their laptops, those who didn't have any laptops, put their desktops in the trunk, went home, pulled in the plug, couldn't fix their Wi-Fi, called IT, how does this work, etc. But one day later, we were serving our clients and candidates. That's flexibility. That's what we've learned. And the extremes are not good now to say, well, virtual work, yeah, but you're going to come to the office, and I want you to be to the office from Monday to Friday. The other extreme is not good either. Some have sold real estate, right? And told their employees, you stay at home, you work from home. The data shows that if you want to attract and retain talent, you better be flexible. You better be open. And what we've realized during that period is that, in fact, the productivity increased, didn't decrease, that, in fact, we had to pay attention that people would not work too much, not too little. And that's the virtual setting that we're in that creates the flexibility that we need to engage with new employment models, being it part-time, flex time, swapping, virtual settings, in order that, yes, the Generation Z, if they want to work on the beach, be my guest. Because what matters is not how much they're going to be at work, but how they're going to perform. The offices are changing, obviously, also, right? The desks are not anymore as many used as before individually, but spaces need to be created in which we brainstorm, we have creative ideas, we innovate. And that attracts the people then coming to the offices, much more than free food and whatever. That attracts people to come back to the office, find their friends in order to solve together solutions. And when you have to be concentrated again and craft a report, you can do this wherever you want, but you don't need to be in the office necessarily. And here the good news again with respect to flexibility and what we've learned is that one can learn this too. In fact, we have at the Adecco Group a coaching platform, Ezra, which is a virtual coaching platform, and we realized that many of the clients want to be taught how to adapt themselves, how to be flexible, and we've seen an increase of 40% of the demands of the volume of coaching requests between the last year and just the few months that we have gone through this year. So to sum up, we are a little bit in a paradox. On the one hand, it is this looming recession, but on the other hand, it's job full. What are the possible causes thereof? One, demographics. The second is the skill shortage. And the third, it's this psychological re-evaluation, people wanting to find themselves. And what are the leadership competencies, the leadership paradigms in this setting? Well, there are many, but certainly there are three prerequisites, I believe. One is learning to learn. Not only reskilling and upskilling in digital and green, but increase employability and do good in societal value. Second leadership paradigm, empathy, empathetic leadership. Not only creating the right structures in the organization, but caring and giving as a leader. And third, be flexible and adaptable, not only within the company, but also allowing people to be flexible. Again, there are certainly others. It's certainly not an exhaustive list, but I think these three are sort of prerequisites for the future of work, and we can get this right together. Thanks very much.
Do we have questions that need to be addressed? And the first hand goes up immediately. We also have a microphone, and so the microphone will pass around so that everybody hears what the question is. Please.
Thank you very much. I'll stand a little bit for the rest of the people. So thank you so much. It was a really, really inspiring speech. And I do have one question that you mentioned a topic throughout the speech about Gen Z. So obviously this is a generation that's really coming up and they're really challenging the way things have been done. And this has been exacerbated by also the previous C-word pandemic that happened. But what do you think their spot would be in the future of work? Actually, if you have maybe a thought about also if this has happened before with other generations. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I don't have a crystal ball, right? We can all chip in with respect to your question. But for sure, you know, I would say on the one hand, what we hear about Generation Z is that they have a sense of entitlement, that they're rather impatient, that they want things immediately. And I'd rather think, on the other hand, they're super connected, they're socially responsible, they want to do good, they're immensely multitasking strong. Well, don't laugh, that's great, right? I mean, I would love to have that gift. So I think the spot of the Gen Z is everywhere. We need to integrate them as soon as possible effectively in the organization. Make sure that the older generation, the baby boomers who are leaving slowly but surely the companies, and the 2/3 being millennials, are really connecting together with the Gen Z so that we can learn from each other. I'm a big believer of keeping, by the way, the older generations, call them that way, right? Why do we need a retirement age at 65, right? I mean, we have many people who want to continue to work and have these people connect with Gen Z. And I've seen, you know, situations, and you just have to believe in this belief, right? That when you connect more experienced people with Gen Z, sometimes you have a firework, because you see that one is open to give, the other is open to receive, and vice versa, and it's just fantastic to see. So the answer is everywhere, everywhere. And they're going to be more on the beach to work than certainly I was, that's for sure. But they're going to work, you know what, maybe more effectively than I was in my small gray office 35 years ago, whatever, so.
Indeed, indeed. I've seen another hand go up right there.
Thank you, JC. Bijan Ashad, the CEO of Atlas Core. We focus on global talent as a social enterprise. So it makes me really optimistic to hear you talk about the future of work. And I was thinking of an Einstein quote. He said, "The world we created is based on our thinking, and we can only change it if we change our thinking." And your paradigm shifts, especially the one around assets and investment in people. And I heard you say reverse that pyramid. Can you say a little bit more your recommendations for how to move that forward?
Well, it's not an easy one, right? The issue, or I should say the issue, yes, the reality is more the term that we need to live with, is that many companies that are publicly listed need to deliver quarterly results. And as soon as you need to deliver quarterly results with quarterly expectations, it's difficult to think in the way that I've tried to explain before. So we need sort of, as I was saying, probably it goes via legal changes, accounting standard changes, and as long as, again, US GAAP and IFRS will see training costs as just a cost in the P&L, it's too easy when you need to deliver a quarter just to cut in, you know, it's not only in training, but in typically whatever, you know, branding, communications, marketing, and all these areas that in fact are investments for the mid and long term. So I don't have a solution other than to say, which is partly a solution, right, that it goes via the legal route, the governance route, and even the accounting route in order to change things. And, you know, if we are critical with ourselves, we talk a lot about this stuff, we don't do much or not sufficiently. Being it in environmental responsibility, social responsibility, and I would love that we have a little bit more courage in this respect, yeah.
Fantastic. Another question from the room. We have one right here in the back. So the microphone is moving in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your speech. I have a question concerning this idea of empathetic leadership. You mentioned that this is one of the core competencies for the future in work. And I would like to ask you the question, have you come across an example where somebody who has been around in a leadership role for 20, 25 years, all of a sudden understands that this is kind of the key ingredient? And how do they really go about developing it?
You meant the empathetic leadership. I missed the first.
Empathetic leadership, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Have I come across? Yeah, because you know, it is something you need to believe in, being coachable and being developed, right? Now, you know, imagine a cube. You want to make a cube a ball. You can sort of fiddle around and then try to roll it. It will still go bum, ba, bum, ba, bum, or more or less. It will roll a little bit more, but it will still be sort of between a cube and a ball. So what I mean to say is, you're not going to change somebody completely with respect to his or her personality traits. Maybe I'm going to be contradicted by the research of the University of Zurich in this respect. But anyways, I mean, it's for sure difficult, right? In your example, somebody has worked 25 years in a manner, and then you ask her or him to be empathetic when he or she never was empathetic, because you're really talking about the behavioral leadership trait. But I've seen successes in this respect. It really takes, it starts with the belief that everyone can change, everyone at any point in time in his or her life. And that's really the starting point. And I've seen successes in this respect, absolutely. But is the cube going to become a ball overnight? No, I don't think so.
Okay, thank you very much.
Brilliant. And here's the next question, right?
Thank you. JC, back to the Gen Z discussion, because of course it's the future. How do we strike the right balance between the sense of entitlement that you've just, mentioned, and also enough of a sense of responsibility, both individually and also collectively in this generation? And how do we then connect this, last bit, meaning the sense of responsibility, together with purpose and value? How do we do that? Any thoughts on this?
Yeah. I will start with just an experience, because it will exemplify what you're saying. An example I just had, or an experience I had a couple of months ago, right? A Gen Z telling me, yeah, but I'm not sure in this company. And I said, it's a great company, a great purpose, great values. Yeah, but I'm not sure, am I really recognized enough? Am I really pushed enough? Am I coached enough? I haven't been promoted yet. And I go, well, how long have you been in the company? I say 7 months. I say, okay, So I think that Generation Z need to learn. I'm going to start with this: learn to be patient. But I'm also going to tell you, second experience I just had. In fact, that's really was it the day before yesterday, where a person tells me, quite frustrated, but this Gen Z, again, sense of entitlement, no patience. What is this? They want everything immediately. And asking me, well, do you think that we will need to adapt or they need to adapt? Interesting question, eh? And it goes a little bit in that direction, right? The responsibility that the Gen Z population has in a company, but also the responsibility that we have. And I think it's both, really. I believe that the Gen Z is not perfect. We are all not perfect, right? And needs to learn that an enterprise has a rhythm, an organization has a rhythm, an NGO has a rhythm, a learning institution has a rhythm, and he or she is not going to change that rhythm overnight, right? So the 7-month example, well, you got to hang in there, right? And it's going to be just okay. Just like a relationship, I like to say. You don't fall in love, sometimes you fall in love immediately, but it takes time, right? You invite for the movies and then for a drink and maybe for a dinner. You see what I mean? And it's complicated. It's complicated, right? It takes time. It's not immediate. And you get to learn the company, you get to learn the people, and you fall metaphorically in love with your environment. It takes time. And I think they need to learn, Gen Z needs to learn that it takes time. On the other hand, quite frankly, I need to learn, I'm not going to say we because there are many young people in the room, but I need to learn that, yeah, I can be more rapid, that Mr. Pareto sometimes knocks on my door and says, it's just okay, you know, you can go with it, you don't need to be perfect, and just decide with this Gen Z colleague. But a sense of responsibility, I think, is in the shoes of the Gen Z, is in the shoes of us welcoming Gen Z now in our companies. And the link to the purpose and the values that is most interesting that you've mentioned is really the glue, I believe. And I'm grateful that you stressed that point again. I mentioned it before also. I really believe it is the glue in the organization. It glues all the colleagues together, whatever generation we're talking about. If that makes sense. Thank you.
And right over here, we have our next question. The microphone is being transported.
Yes, hello, I'm Marion, working in organizational development. And you were talking about new employee models. I couldn't agree more, but there's also new organizational models coming with that. So we're talking about, agile structures, we're talking about holacracy, we're also talking about now new remote organizations only. And I wonder, what's your picture to focus on remote organizations, which come with completely new challenges to leaders, I think. What's your picture of, facing the challenge of remote organizations?
Could you explain maybe just so that we're all clear, remote organizations, what's your definition in this respect?
Well, my definition, if you look to a lot of startups, they don't have offices anymore. There's no headquarters. There's an address, which is a post box. And they recruit people from all over the world, basically, which do not meet in any office. Usually they have structures where they once a year have a week together, where they get together, but there's no such thing as a daily routine of office. And leadership is very different in these structures. I wonder what your picture is on that.
I don't think that necessarily offices are needed, but a location to come together is needed, for sure. We're human beings. Human interaction is critical. Quite frankly, I'm going to tell you, I prefer to stand here because I knew that my speech and interaction with you would be 45 minutes or so. If it had been maybe a few minutes as my colleagues, I would have gone up here. But I need to see you. I need to feel you. I want to hear you, right? That's what you need as soon as you begin to collaborate together. If it's just a unilateral input you're giving, you can do this virtually all the time, I guess, but that's not how companies are working. Companies are working in listening to people, in involving people, in making sure that brainstorming, creativity is bringing the results, and all the data shows that, in fact, creativity and innovation improves performance of the companies. And the innovation and creativity comes from being together in brainstorming sessions. So you need a place to come together. That's my belief, 100% sure. Does it need to be in an office? No, not necessarily. Does a company need an office space? Not necessarily, but then the leader needs to organize herself or himself to make sure that these people come together at times when this is needed to have these sessions that I was alluding to. Make sense?
Fantastic. And actually,
I'm going to be just, point blank pragmatic, right? So that's how I feel about things.
The opposition may sit right there, yeah. So we actually do have time for one last question. You can take that opportunity to perhaps put your question forward, or anybody else. Do we have? Okay, well, maybe we'll.
Yeah, we're going to
take 1, 2, 3, and that's it. Yeah, okay.
So, thank you. When you mentioned about reskilling people, you mentioned that probably accounting standards should adopt to reflect it as an investment. But shouldn't be like a redefinition of what success of a company is. So this is very much like a shareholder thinking, quarterly reporting, growth and money and so. But aren't people valuable enough that some of the stakeholders should recognize that a company doing good for people is a successful company, not just only the company is making a lot of money?
Yeah, good point. There are companies, for-profit companies that are, let's call them NGOs or non-for-profit companies, and that will always be the case, I believe, right? I'm not sure. Let me just maybe challenge you a little bit. I'm not sure that when you're in a non-profit environment, you do more good than when you're in a for-profit environment. It depends on how you want to do good. I don't want to brag too much about the Adecco Group, but I'm going to tell you that the Adecco Group employs every day 2 million people. So we have the opportunity to bring, that's what I tell our colleagues always, right? I mean, it's a fantastic purpose. Now, you can leave your CV here, afterwards if you want to be hired by the Adecco Group, but joke aside now, we're a for-profit organization, publicly listed. Every quarter we issue results. But hey, we have a societal value which is huge. Bringing people with profiles together with jobs, matching them, that this match is so great that every morning when they wake up, they say, I want to go to work. And when they come home in the evening, they got a big smile on their face. And research has shown, by the way, that kids, when they see their parents coming home with a big smile, actually they think, oh, work is pretty cool, eh? They can even come home at, 8, 9 p.m. because they're hardworking, versus people coming home at 4:30 and being all, oh my gosh, my work, and they look at their parents and say, I don't want to work in life, right? So hard work, a lot of work, profit is not bad. The question is, what are we doing with it? How are we investing the money? We invested in people. Other companies invested maybe because they're, if they're not prudent enough, polluting, etc., they're investing in environmental responsibility. We have clearly a social purpose. In every day's work, ESG is ingrained in everything we do. So I'm just, how should I say, challenging a bit the fact of for-profit, non-for-profit, shareholders, no shareholders. I have no problem shareholders putting us as a company under pressure to be more profitable, because I know that these profits, we will invest them into people to grow even further, to not serve 2 million of people tomorrow, but maybe 3 million in 5 to 10 years or whatever, in 20 years, I don't know. Make sense?
And with that, we'll move right to this question quickly, and the short answer, and then to our last question.
My question is about the empathetic leadership, and I was wondering whether you are aware of research or findings, whether there's a difference between genders, because we've seen with other characteristics, a male leader is seen assertive, a female leader is seen bossy, and whether there is a difference for empathy there as well. Thank you.
Well, you open a whole chapter here, and those who know me in the room know that this is sort of one of my favorite topics, so I could go on and on. I'm going to try to be very short, and maybe the research question is better posed to people who do research than myself, but I don't think we should have stereotypes, very clearly. I've seen female leaders being very empathetic and female leaders being not enough empathetic. I've seen male leaders being very empathetic and male leaders being not sufficiently empathetic. I would tend to say that what we need is a mix. Why? Because diversity increases always performance, always. And you're pointing to gender. I'm just going to tell you a small story, because talking about empathy, you can think about also the empathy to have to differently abled people. So the story is as follows, true stories. I was exposed to a big retail company in my life, and out of 500,000 employees, 10,000 were differently abled people. Now, in the stores, you would see that the queues behind the disabled people were longer on the cashier desks than the abled people. Let's just call it that way to be clear. I don't like these terms, but anyways. Do you know why? It's not because they were not working fast enough. Because, in fact, the customers, the clients, they wanted to go and be served by this differently abled person, because after the first moment of hesitation, of embarrassment, they would realize that they would do good. Isn't it interesting? So I got interested in this topic too, and I went to the International Labour Organization looking at some statistics, etc. And it turns out every time you have a differently abled person in your team, it enhances performance. Interesting, right? So diversity, whether it's gender, race, citizenship, experience, skills, you name it, increases performance. So the mix is important in a team. And it's not about, is a female leader more empathetic than a male leader? You will have female leaders who are and who are not, male leaders who are not, in my experience. And the idea, obviously, is to develop them so that they have.
Excellent. And our final question goes to the gentleman here in the middle.
Thank you very much. I just want to comment or have a question to this diversity. In the end, what we see is how to make use of skills and match it with values and expectations. And I mean, you might find a perfect company where you can match this. And then when it comes to the contract situation, then usually you get a contract or agreement says you work 40 hours and you have this job description, you have this boss. So what do you think about a beach contract or an office contract? You know, a contract that says you don't have a boss, you will have an empathy advisor or a team that advises you, and to put a standard, go away from standard work contracts. How do you see this in this kind of diversity scheme and trust and value?
Well, there are jurisdictions today where there are no work contracts, but it's just a letter. But I believe that if that answers your question, and you tell me if not, I believe that nevertheless an organization, it's not just by accident that organization is called organization. You organize things, right? So you need to have some sort of hierarchy, right? Otherwise, you tell me communities that have been successful, call it in politics, in sports, in the army, obviously in business, etc., without a clear organization. And the experience I have, and I think it's also shown by research, is that people are striving for things to be clear. They don't want things that are unclear. Again, we need to differentiate a boss, to call it boss, right? It's not a bad thing. But a boss who is a bad leader is a bad thing. See what I mean? So I think organization, hierarchy, structure is not a bad thing, actually. but the people who, in fact, make the organization live need to be the right leaders. And hence, in a contract, I would dare to say, just to be even more pragmatic, I would dare to say that if I receive a contract, I want to know whom I report to, I want to know who my speaking partner is, whom I'm going to look into the eyes for coaching, who I'm going to look into the eyes to have career advice. I want to have that. Whether it's in the contract or not is a little bit secondary, but hey, if it's in a contract, why not? Because I want to have a little bit of order and discipline in the organization that I'm joining. But let's not confuse things. It doesn't mean that I will join an organization that is authoritarian. No. I can very well join an organization that is very collaborative, but I know who my speaking partner is, who my coach will be, with whom I'm going to interact every month in order to make sure that my job is fulfilled in an appropriate manner in the more collective context. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you. Big applause for Jean-Christophe Deslarzes. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Well, I'll hand over for the closing.
Dear JC, I promised Jennifer to be no longer than 30 minutes. So thank you very much for opening this lecture series on the future of work. In regular teaching, constructive alignment is the most important thing. Constructive alignment means what we teach will be asked in exams, and we make sure that what we taught is also repeated at the end, and it's very simple. You made it very simple for us. Learning to learn, empathetic leaders, and adaptable and flexible leaders. But you asked a question which remained unanswered. So I took the liberty to close my eyes. And my first conclusion was, I'm not re-evaluating my career options because I have the best job. So you will ask, what was the question? And the question was, who was your best boss? So I have two quantitative answers to that. One is 1, and the other one is 40,000. So one I will allude later to. He's in the audience, so I can't say anything. But the second one is 40,000. So I'm in charge of the largest organization that is dominated by Gen Z and millennials. And we are basically running that in a non-hierarchical way, which means ideas are particularly non-hierarchical. And if you accept that 40,000 people take it every day as a sport to know things, to know how to run a university better than I do, you have the greatest job, because I get input from 40,000 people. And that's the way we manage the University of Zurich. And it's very empathetic, and it's the coolest job. So I hope everyone will aspire whenever I re-evaluate my career options. So, but first of all, and last but not least, let me thank you all for joining this lecture. I have the pleasure to be between you and the reception, which we invite everyone to. But before that, I have to do an administrative task. But let me thank you very much, and I will come down and award you a plaque as a recognition for your support to shape a more human future of work. JC, thank you very much. Dear audience, thank you very much for joining.
Okay, with that, we come to an end. If you found this lecture inspirational, please feel free to post about it and spread the word. And join us next time when we'll reconvene in the fall for our next lecture on leadership in the future of work. To be informed about that, when it will be, who it will be taken by the stage, and so on, sign up for our newsletter. You'll be informed then. And now I think we continue the discussion and debate at the reception downstairs in the Lichthof. Enjoy. Thank you very much for tonight. See you soon.